Welcome everyone to today's webinar that is part of our Community Voices series that we started this year. You can also go to our YouTube page to see some of our past Community Voices conversations. My name is Becky Megas, she, her pronouns, and I am the founder and chief care connector for Women in Sustainability. Women in Sustainability is an inclusive social and environmental justice nonprofit that is dedicated to caring for the people that care for the planet through community, advocacy, resources, and education to create a sustainable and equitable future through the feminist viewpoint and leadership. Women in Sustainability strives to create a safe space for like-minded and diverse individuals to create purposeful connections and conversations. All are welcome in our community. Few housekeeping items before we get started. As I mentioned, we have the recording started for today. And we also have our closed captions on. You can toggle those on and off by clicking on the three little dots down at the bottom that says more and clicking that to either show subtitles or hide subtitles, whichever your preference. You can also change your views. We will have a presentation from Jessi, so you'll be able to change your views so that you can have a side-by-side presentation with the speaker. And you can do that at the very top where it says view. We ask that you change your pronouns. We work really hard to be an inclusive organization. So if you would like to add your pronouns, you can click on the three dots over your name and add in your pronouns as you feel comfortable. Of course, we still live in this fun virtual world. We do ask that you stay muted during our presentation to not interrupt our speaker. As I mentioned at the beginning, if you haven't yet, open up your chat, say hello. We'll be utilizing this chat throughout. This will be an interactive presentation. So get that chat going now, say hello, let us know where you're joining us from. And if you have any information that you would like to add to today's conversation about being able to find common grounds to have a relatable conversation. We'll also have opportunities to ask Jessi questions. So you can do that in the chat as well. And we'll probably have opportunities throughout the presentation to ask questions openly as well. So another thing that we love to do with our chat and through our presentation is if you have anything that you hear that you really like and it really kind of gets your energy up, if your camera's on, click your fingers, clap your hands. If your camera is off, use those reaction icons down at the bottom and show a little love for our speaker. This just provides a little more energy in this virtual space that we live in. And of course, we are all here to learn today, so be sure to be kind and courteous and to share the space with everybody. We're going to learn a lot from each other. We're going to learn from our presenter, and I'm really excited to be able to have the conversation of finding the common ground for relatable conversations. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to introduce our speaker. So today's speaker is Jessi Burg, who started her journey as an entrepreneur after a series of toxic work environments. She thought, surely there has to be a way to value employees, pay a living wage, and still be able to work outside. As she built her landscaping company, Paris to Perennials, she discovered being a business owner amplified her voice and began advocating for the trades and seasonal and gig economy works. Now launching her second business, Outgrow Your Garage, she's building that advocacy work and teaching other trades, services, and mobile companies how to grow sustainably and equitably. As a value-driven business owner, Jessi absolutely adores proving that you can make a profit while breaking down class barriers. Through Outgrow Your Garage, Jessi is also able to support organizations that reduce recidivism through entrepreneurship. In the future, she plans to have multilingual programming, broadening access for recent immigrants. Please help me give a warm Women in Sustainability welcome to our speaker, Jessi.
Thanks, y'all. I know some of you, I don't know some of you, so this is delightful. I'm really excited to see Jen here all the way from South Carolina because I haven't seen her in a really long time. So hi, Jen. And so yeah, I am out in Delta, Colorado, which is on the western slope. And so we are an agricultural town. We also used to be a mining town. And so we, like many other small towns, used to have a mine. The mine closed and we lost a lot of jobs and haven't really ever gained them back. So how do we talk about these things is a huge topic here. It is a huge topic for lots of people. How do we talk about sustainability? How do we talk about making a shift to clean energy? How do we talk about a changing agriculture? My background is largely in landscaping, agriculture, and environmental education. So thinking about the ways that we can make these ideas accessible is something that is very, very near and dear to my heart. And I also live in a very conservative, very traditional values kind of district. Lauren Boebert is actually my House rep, and I'm very confident that she is very likely to get reelected based on how we operate around here and how our primaries went. So this is something we talk about a lot, and how to find ways to have common ground, how to talk about different pieces. And I worked in landscaping for a long time, which has its own set of adventures in how do you talk about sustainability? How do you balance business? How do you balance what people want? How do you balance expectations? So this is something I love in both my personal life and my professional life. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. There we go. All right. Can y'all see the presentation? Perfect. All right, and then I can see the chat. I have the chat up on a different screen, so you can feel free to drop questions in the chat, or I am a big fan of being interrupted. The other thing I'm going to do is drop a link in the chat right now. We're going to talk about feelings today. And so this link is a feelings list I like to use sometimes. It is also in the resources of this presentation, so if you want to track it down later, but it'll be helpful if you have it up when we get to the group discussion part. So let's talk about how to find common ground to make sustainability conversations relatable. I am presenting. We are going to have some featuring the Lorax and the Onceler, which I think is a really spectacular way to outline a lot of these issues. Full disclosure, this presentation is actually based on a longer course I used to teach middle schoolers when I was working in environmental education, where we talked about what does sustainability mean? Why do you care about the environment? And how do you actually think about this on a broader level? So I've adapted it for y'all since you have more background than your average 10-year-old. Maybe not, but that's what we got. So let's start with, why is it so hard to talk about sustainability? And so you can say this out loud, you can drop it in the chat. But we all showed up to this talk because you're like, yeah, I have a hard time with having these conversations. There are people in my life I have a hard time talking to. Why is it hard?
I can go. What makes it hard for me is anytime I bring it up to people who don't necessarily believe in it, they think of it as fear mongering, or I don't know. It's really interesting. Somebody told me recently, if you mention environment rather than climate change, people are more likely to discuss it, but it also doesn't really address the actual issue. So at least for me, I get very charged and emotional sometimes. So that's why I came here.
Yeah, why else is it hard? So things that we've got in the chat is, it's hard to bring up topics if you're emotionally reactive when you talk about it. Absolutely. It's hard to kind of simmer down a little bit if you're really passionate, right? And we have this idea in society that if you're overly passionate, somehow you can't also be logical at the same time, which is also tied up in all these roles of women are too emotional to have conversations about things. I'm sure we've all been told that at some point, and you're like, yeah, thanks. That's not demeaning at all. Good chat. And so those kinds of pieces, being angry and frustrated, translate to those who don't have a background in it. And Scarlett, I loved what you said about kind of how do you create that language to be able to talk about it, right? If you say environment versus climate change versus sustainability, people will have different reactions. When I was in landscaping, one of the things I said a lot was that I did landscaping that was ecologically appropriate for Colorado. I didn't say water-wise, I didn't say permaculture-based, I didn't say it was organic, I just said that it was ecologically appropriate for Colorado. And that worked really well in terms of a framing space. So yeah, that language piece is huge. Anything else that you want to add? Some people make me feel like I'm a downer when I talk about this. Yeah, that's a huge thing. Like, it's a bummer. It is, they're hard topics. We have emotions tied up in them. Anything else that anybody wants to add?
I'll add something real quick. I just think for me, the problem is like not taking it personally almost, because I am a professional environmental scientist and a just nature lover as a person. It just feels like so much of who I am and what I do every day, that when people don't believe things that I'm working on really hard, it's hard to not, you know, it's an emotional reaction because it is so much of who I am, I think, is my big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We all have worked really hard to gain professional credibility in whatever your field is, whatever the thing is. Like, you want to be treated as a professional and like, you know what you're talking about. And so it's really hard when somebody dismisses your entire field as hogwash or whatever. So yeah, absolutely. So with that, we are going to talk about, we're going to do some Dr. Seuss framing. And I really like using the Lorax to frame these discussions for a couple of reasons. One, we're all generally familiar with the story. I'm assuming if you're not familiar with the story, it is the story of the Onceler who moves to the Lorax's environment and starts cutting down trees to build thneeds. And a thneed is a thing that everyone needs. And so that is the premise of the story. By the end of the story, the Onceler has completely decimated the environment. The Lorax has argued for the rights of the trees, the rights of the birds, the rights of the brown barbaloots. They've, you know, all the environment has been destroyed and the Lorax has left. It's kind of a depressing ending. And then at the end, they talk about, you know, if you really want things to change, you have to be the person to change, to create things changing. I'm happy to drop, if you've never read the Lorax, if you haven't read it in a while, I'm happy to drop a link to the YouTube video where they read it out loud in the chat. But one of the things I really like, and one of the quotes that people pull a lot from the Lorax is, "I speak for the trees have no tongues," right? And that's a sentiment that we really like in the environmentalist world of the environment can't talk for itself, right? I have hummingbirds that come and hang out in my front yard and they argue over who gets the hummingbird feeder. And there's no way for me to tell the hummingbirds, like, guys, I refill it. I keep sugar around. Like, this is a never ending feeder. You can have as much as you want. The resources are not scarce. I can't say that to the hummingbirds. They just have to learn that on their own when I refill the feeder all the time. So that's something we really like, is you're advocating for this idea of, I'm speaking for something that has no voice. The part that we miss a lot is and I'm asking you, sir, at the top of my lungs. He was very upset as he shouted and puffed. And so when we think about that, we're back to that presentation method, right? A lot of times, both people on whatever side of the issue, you're so emotionally invested that it's hard to both get someone to listen to you and it's hard for you to listen. So we're going to start with that. So in our Lorax problem solving, right, there are a couple of key problems in the Lorax. So the Onceler, right, he builds this company, right? He comes into an area, he creates a product, he says, okay, great, I have these resources, I'm going to build a business, right? Fairly common, standard thing. So when he's trying to build this business, what is the Onceler, what are you trying to achieve when you build these businesses, regardless of what it is? What's the point? You can drop it in the chat, you can call it out. But why do we start businesses? Why do we move places to do stuff? Support families, absolutely. Profit, passion, capitalism. I mean, if we could do the things we love and not get paid, that would be great. But Scarlett's right. We got to get paid so that we can exchanging dollars for goods and services is a real part of our life. Making a difference in the world of our communities, finding a need. Yeah, so these are all reasons, right? So when we think about why people make choices, that's really why most people make choices, right? They want to have enough money to support their family. They want to be able to do the things that they like to do. They want to make a difference in the world, in their community. and live life in a way that works for them. Why doesn't the Lorax want to listen to those pieces? And so that kind of goes back to why doesn't the Lorax want to listen? Why isn't the Onceler saying, but I can make money off these trees? And the Lorax says, I don't care, because this is a habitat for someone. Why doesn't he want to listen to the Onceler? See, and this is a much harder thing, right?
I guess because, oh, sorry.
Go.
I guess because he knows he's right, you know, or that, you know, he's in a position where he actually understands that this is important, more important than making money.
Yeah. The Lorax doesn't see, right. So it is about that money piece, right? The Lorax doesn't see value in the Onceler's business. The Lorax derives value from the trees, right? So they have a different set of what their values are, right? There's a fundamental miscommunication, psychological distance between the Onceler or the Lorax and the challenge. So yeah, thinking about these pieces of, it's hard for the Lorax to listen to see that there is any value in generating income from this space. And so in our feeling things, so the other one I want to kind of pause here. So if you look at that feelings chart, right? When I pose those questions, right, where we're really flipping the script of what is the business person trying to do, and why doesn't the environmentalist stand-in want to listen? How does that question make you feel? And so pick a word or two from our feelings list, and I can actually. Do you want here? I can pull it up. We'll switch the screen share, new share, feelings list. So there you go. You can now see a feelings list. So yeah, so pick a word or two from the feelings list. How did that little exercise actually make you feel? And you can either pull it from the body sensations if you want to. We feel things in our bodies, or you can pull it from that feelings list. So we got anxious, we got heartbroken, powerless, frustrated, questioning, yeah. So like, it's hard to do that, to think about it from this alternate perspective. Figuring out how to be able to hold those feelings of powerlessness and frustration and anger in a place where you're then able to listen and look at things from that other perspective is vital to being able to talk about sustainability, to be able to talk about differences. And in the sustainability world, where so often it feels like someone's lifestyle is being attacked, the people on the other side are having those same feelings of frustration. So part of your common ground is that the same way that you feel powerless and frustrated having that conversation about sustainability and environmental management and climate change and all of these different pieces, the person you're talking to is probably having those same feelings. And so that's a great starting point. So your first common ground is everybody kind of feels lousy about it. It's not a great starting point because everybody feels lousy and that's not really what we're aiming for, but recognizing that it's hard on both sides. And let me switch back. I lost my mouse. There it is. All right. Okay, so now we're back to slides. You can all see slides again. Awesome. I've just discovered you can go from like one screen share to a different screen share without stopping sharing and starting again. I'm very excited about it. Side note. So yeah, and here's a couple of quotes, right, that I think about this, right? So I've pulled some quotes from both sides. So this first set is from the Onceler. So the Onceler cuts down his first tree and he knits this Thneed. And he says, there's no cause for alarm. I chopped just one tree. I am doing no harm. I am being quite useful. This thing is a Thneed. And immediately after that, the Lorax says, what's a Thneed? You're just making shit up now. And he says, a Thneed is a thing that everybody needs. And then he says, okay, great. The Thneed takes off. He takes a test. He says, I called all my brothers and uncles and aunts. And I said, listen here, here's a wonderful chance for the whole Onceler family to get mighty rich. So he says, I'm prosperous. I want to share this with the people that I love. I want to bring this to my family because I am a success. I want to pull the other people into it. And then as it gets kind of out of hand, he says, I meant no harm. I most truly did not, but I had to grow bigger. So bigger I got. I biggered my factory. I biggered my roads. So he isn't necessarily sure. Things kind of get away, right? How do you make those choices of how big is big enough? How much support do you need to give to your family? What do those choices look like? And the Lorax is sitting there going, sir, you are crazy with greed. There is no one on earth who would buy that full Thneed, right? So right off from the very bat, the Onceler makes a Thneed and the Lorax says, you're immediately dumb and wrong. This product by itself is already bad. So that possibility for having a conversation about how big to get is negated. And then at the end, of course, we've got now, thanks to your hacking my trees to the ground, there's not enough truffula fruit to go around. So it's starting to really impact the environment, right? So we have these two different perspectives, right? One is I'm trying to provide my family. I don't know how to create this idea of enough. And as you all know, we really do live in this kind of scarcity mindset society. We think of resources as a pie. It's not a pie. Me having something does not mean Becky doesn't, and vice versa. I want Becky to have stuff. I want to have stuff. I want everybody to be happy. So figuring out those things, you have to be able to have those conversations. And when the Onceler is really thinking about it, he's going, and he spoke with a voice that's sharpish and bossy. How many of you have ever been told that, well, you can't catch flies that you catch more flies with honey than vinegar? And you have to be nice about the things that you say. You have to be polite. No one's going to listen to you if you say it in that tone of voice, right? We're all familiar with this, right? And he says, all you do is yap, yap, yap and say bad, 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 bad. Well, I have my rights, sir, and I'm telling you, I intend to go on doing just what I do. Who's heard that in political discourse recently, right? That's a really common thing. Don't tell me what to do. I'm going to do whatever I want, right? It could be the American national motto, right? We all do things out of spite. I myself have often said, oh, you think I can't do this? Ha, watch this. I'm going to do it anyway, right? And I say that as a woman who works in a male-dominated industry, but it comes up in all kinds of contexts. This is a very American way to feel. So yeah, so there's this huge communication gap on that, right? And actually, before we talk about why they can't communicate, again, when you think about that, go back to our feelings chart. What else is coming up now, right? We've kind of talked a little bit about this anger. We've talked about these pieces. We'll pull our feelings chart back up. What else comes up? Hopelessness, sadness. Arika, I'm really sorry you're going to leave while we're talking about all the sad things, and then you're going to miss the part where we talk about how to like make that be better. So I'm sorry for whatever you have to do that makes you leave, but I promise the rest of this presentation, we talk about how to make those feelings feel better. So perfect. So yeah, so we're having this sadness, this hopelessness. Thinking about those, one of the reasons I really love the feelings list is you can name it, right? So sadness is different than frustration. Hopelessness is different than helplessness. So when you start to name your feelings around this, it helps you figure out what the next action is, right? Because you have something to do with, right? Now you have a feeling I can do with something, right? What do I do with this feeling? And so figuring out, if you're frustrated, you can figure out the source of your, right? What are the pieces of my frustration? Can I mitigate any individual piece of it? If I'm hopeless, where are the places I can look for hope? Where are the places I can find joy? And so really thinking about being able to navigate those individual emotions is a great starting point, even if you own it, right? So that's a good starting point in that conversation too, of being able to say, I feel really frustrated when we talk about this because it makes me feel hopeless. Naming that all by itself can be extremely helpful. A sense of like, you're not alone. How many of you feel less alone in these conversations just looking at this list of feelings in the chat? So having those pieces, talking about your feelings. I know in this culture we don't like talking about your feelings, but really talk about your feelings. We got to do it. It's a real thing, particularly in these emotionally charged issues. As all of you so succinctly said at the beginning, I have a lot of emotions, so it's hard to talk about. Great. So if you can't talk about the topic, talk about the emotions, right? It's a great starting point. So back to our Lorax Onceler adventures. Why can't they communicate? What are the communication barriers, right? They're clearly on different sides. They are clearly doing a lousy job of talking to each other or finding any kind of common ground or talking about, is there an option between zero needs in the world and complete and total environmental destruction, right? That's a lot of what we talk about in sustainability. What's the balance? So why, in our Lorax and Onceler analogy, why can't they communicate about that? And again, you can kind of call it out. You can put it in the chat, whatever knocks your socks off.
I guess like different needs, different emotions, different experiences. Something that usually gets me really frustrated is that you can tell somebody like, oh, this is why you're experiencing this problem. Like I could say it all day, every single day to this person, but they're not actually going to understand it until it affects them directly. So I think that's another issue, is that sometimes it's hard to get through. And so we think like emotions are the best way to go about it, but it's not always palatable.
That's a good one. Focusing on the differences instead of what they may have in common, refusing to see each other's sides are things that have popped up in the chat. Yeah, all of these pieces. And we do often want to appeal to people's emotions, and not everybody is going to be somebody that you can appeal to their emotions on, right? So this is something that you see a lot in like marketing conversations, right? So if you are selling your product, right? Some people are going to respond to the story of your product. Some people are going to respond to, here are the specific features of my product. Here's what it does. Here's how it makes your life easier. Some people are going to respond to the colors in your marketing campaign and it looks pretty and whatever, but everybody kind of has these different ways that they get information and make choices. And so varying those pieces, right? Making it accessible to where that person is really important, whether you are working on marketing your needs or whether you are trying to talk to the Onceler about ways that he can still make a profit, right? The Onceler is motivated by profit and being able to support his family, and the Lorax is motivated by protecting the habitat of his friends, right? He's friends with all of the people who live in that. So really, in both cases, they're trying to protect their communities, but they're not recognizing that you can protect both the communities at the same time. And so that's a huge, huge thing where they're focusing on those differences, right? And they're thinking of it as a pie, right? So many people are really thinking about resources as a pie, right? If you have it, I can't. And if I have it, you can't, right? Life is not a pie. So really working on some of those scarcity pieces, right? So let's talk about how does this show up in real life, right? That's really what we're here for, right? Dr. Seuss is great. We got to move it out of fiction into the real world. So here are some real life examples, and I picked easy ones for you, right? These should not hurt so much. So our first one, and let's see, Becky, how many people do we have?
We are currently at 16.
All right, cool. Will you give me, I'm going to explain what we're doing. Will you do breakout rooms of 3 or 4?
Got it.
All right. So our first real life example we're going to talk about is fire mitigation is necessary, but people don't always want to cut down their trees because they're pretty, they provide shade for their houses. But a lot of us live in fire prone areas, and you have to cut down those trees in order to not have your house burned down when things catch fire, right? That is a real thing. And we have all seen that, right? So we have to do fire mitigation. People don't want to cut down trees because if we do thinning out of live trees, they're going, oh no, I want that tree close to my house. It's pretty. Also, it's just generally bad to cut down trees, right? The Lorax did a great job of teaching us all, you can't cut down trees under any circumstances. False. Sometimes we have to cut down the trees. And we have to cut down the trees so that there is defensible space around buildings and houses. We have to cut down trees so that they don't grow so closely together, so that they are able to have enough resources so that all the trees are healthier. The other thing that crops up a lot in the fire mitigation piece is we're back to that same, you can't tell me what to do on my land. And then in a lot of areas, it's also cutting down trees is expensive. I know that I'm supposed to do this, but I don't know how to afford it. So we have all these pieces. So we're going to break you out into rooms of 3 or 4 and try to come up with just as many different perspectives that somebody's going to come at from this issue, right? So think about the perspectives that somebody's come in. How do you say we need to have mitigation for fire, and how would you present that to someone who knows that fire mitigation needs to happen but can't afford it? How do you talk about it to, what are some ways you could talk about it to somebody who is like, it's my land and I don't want to? How do you talk about it to somebody who says, but I really like that tree right next to my house? How do you talk about it to somebody who says, yeah, but I live really high and I want the tree next to my house because it provides shade and keeps my heating bills down? I'm trying to be environmentally friendly here by keeping my heating bills down by using the shade, right? So think about those different perspectives and just start to brainstorm as a collective. What are ways that you can talk about fire mitigation to your different populations? Any questions about that?
How long would you like to go? How long are you going to go for?
Let's do 2 minutes.
2 minutes? 2 minutes.
2 minutes, and then you can give them like a 30-second warning.
Got it.
Pull them back in.
On the clock. All right. Ready?
Welcome back, y'all. All right. So see if we're all kind of reshare my screen here. Here we go. Gallery. All right. Let me look at everybody for like a hot second. So what were some things that came out of that? Who got a new, and we'll kind of do this as a poll, who got a new perspective they wouldn't have thought of? You can either raise your hand or throw a little hand up in the chat. Who heard an idea that they can implement the next time they have a conversation about something that has a bunch of different perspectives? Yeah. So we're going to do our next one kind of as a collective group here. Share our screen again. All right. So the other one I like to talk about is organic food, right? We all have organic food opinions, regardless of where you fall in that. I have some interesting organic food opinions, given that I live in an agricultural town and have spent a lot of my life working in agriculture. So it is always something I like to talk about. So one of the things that's true is farmers growing organic food can sell for a higher price, right? This is a really common thing that you hear touted in. Farmers should want to go organic because they can sell their food for a higher price. They'll make more money. But it takes 3 years before they can get certified organic. So we're going to do a quick little brainstorm on this of what are some ways as people who both want farmers to be able to afford their land, eat, participate in society, sell things for goods, buy things for dollars. What are some ways that we can bridge that gap? And this can be things you already know, things that are happening. This is a fairly common. I tried to pick something I thought at least a couple people would know about. So what are some ways, when you think about that you can bridge that gap of, I want to do the right thing, but it takes input before I see the return, and it is hard to do that? What are actual solutions that people have seen for that?
What about like community supported agriculture, like a co-op kind of a thing? At least to bridge the gap, kind of get a membership subscriptions, and then they just eat whatever foods in season and get a little
CSAs,
money while they're waiting for certification.
Absolutely. What else?
Mine's more of a question. So say like you are somebody who sells at a farmer's market, and you sell organic food. Does that person still have to get certified within that amount of time, or?
In order to, so the certification, you can say whatever you want, packaging is packaging. But in order to get that little like USDA certification, USDA organic thing, it's a 3-year process in which you can't use any pesticides, and your fields have been really used to using pesticides and fertilizers and all kinds of pieces. So there's a bunch of things on that. Anna says in the chat, sharing information about transition crops that are available as farms are moving from traditional to organic. So yeah, sharing resources about how to make this process happen easier. Absolutely. What else?
So long-term gains rather than just short-term losses.
Talking about long-term gains versus short-term losses. Sure. Any other? I'll take one more suggestion in there. All right. So the last thing I'll posit is talk to the farmers. Right? That's something that is missing from a lot of these conversations. We have conversations about agriculture, but without actually talking to farmers about what will work, what is realistic. Right? So if you say, okay, a CSA is a great option. Okay, cool. How do you set a CSA up? How would a farmer do that? Right? Those are all the questions that they're going to have. So what are those logistical pieces? If you're sharing information about transition crops, it's going to be more effective if one farmer shares that information with another farmer, because they're going to be able to answer practical pieces. And that's a huge one I think we miss a lot in these sustainability conversations, is it's very easy to get lost in having conversations about instead of having conversations with. And that kind of brings us all the way back around to the beginning when we talked about those feelings of helplessness and those feelings of, I can't seem to get them to see my side. That happens on the other piece too. And so really working on what solutions are possible and what solutions are possible for the people who need those solutions, right? They always have to be involved. So in our mini wrap up, so we are going to use Becky as an example because I found out this was happening at the beginning of this thing. So we're not going to crowdsource an example. We're going to use Becky. Becky, do you want to share your upcoming problem?
Sure. So I am getting ready to go on a vacation with my family. We're going to Seattle to see my brother, and my parents are driving from Ohio, and they're driving through Denver, and they're picking us up. And I'm going to be in a car with my parents for 2 days. And as I mentioned, they're from Ohio. They're from very conservative white Ohio. And so we have very different views on the world and how we think about things. So yes, I'll be in a car with my parents for 2 days.
Yeah. So what are some ways, based on our conversation today and based on the things we've just talked about in how we talk about easier things like fire mitigation and organic food solutions, right? What are some ways that Becky can talk to her parents? Yeah, it is the same issue with the recycling industry. Absolutely, Becky, on that point. Like recycling is a huge one. I don't even have recycling, like straight up. I do not have access to recycling at my house. I have to drive 25 minutes to get to a recycling facility. So we don't have infrastructure. So even if we got the infrastructure, you'd still have to convince people to use it. So it's a big uphill battle. So what are kind of those entry points, right? So if Becky's parents start talking about, here is, we are excited that Roe v. Wade was overturned. And Becky goes, oh God, I'm horrified about this. Asking questions about what somebody likes about the environment. Yeah, what else? How do you find that common ground?
I ask why, and then they'll give me a reason, and I keep asking why. And just really, really reductionist. It's like the same thing when someone makes a racist joke. You're like, why? What's going on there? Tell me more.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I also think something we talked about in our little breakout group was just acknowledgement, like listening, but really listening to that why, and saying, I hear you. Maybe I don't understand you or agree with you, but I hear you. And then working from there.
What else?
Yeah, I agree with both Haley and Anna. And something I've learned recently is rephrasing the question right back to them. That way they can hear exactly what they said, and then try to work around it. So they know that you listened, and then you're able to be like, oh, so I heard you say that you don't think that this is right. Is that what you said? And they're like, yeah. And then you can ask why.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to keep the open mind that both sides have pros and cons. Like legitimately, not one side is completely right. There are two sides to every issue. And if you just keep an open mind that the other person might have some points, you could learn something.
And you can find a different solution you didn't know was an option. Is one I like on that front too. And so looking for those pieces, right? Where is the place you can agree on, right? So like Becky and her parents' common ground is we both like Becky's brother enough to go visit him. That's a great starting point, right? You have at least one thing in common to be able to do that. So remembering that like there are these little pieces, right? So what is the value that you both hold to be able to handle that, right? Where is that common ground? And it might be something as simple as, in my case, we all live in Delta, and I would like the town to continue to be large enough to have a grocery store. Like that in a tiny agricultural town, like we have a grocery store, we're pretty excited about that. We'd like to keep it. We're the only grocery store in the county. That's not true. Hotchkiss has a city market too, but we have 2 city markets. That's our groceries in the entire county. So making sure those things, chatting about the weather as you travel, right? So you can kind of talk about these things, right? Everybody can agree that it's hot. You're like, great. We need to figure out how to make it be less hot, because we're all uncomfortable together, So these little pieces, like it might sound trite, but y'all just smiled. So like that's a good starting point. So Jamie says she likes to do that, to ask more questions and provide new information, facts, or viewpoints on a topic to encourage people to grow in their thinking on whatever issue. So yeah, like, and one thing I always like to think about is if I'm expecting somebody else to listen to me, I need to be willing to listen to them. And I think that's especially true in the sustainability world. Something I'm fond of saying is that if your lifestyle isn't the one under attack, then you are the one who is responsible for being the bigger person. And that goes whether we are talking about reskilling oil and gas workers to be able to ease them into renewable energy, or whether we're talking about creating queer safe spaces in our communities. Right? Those things are both really important. And so when you think about it, it's like if you are not the one whose livelihood is being attacked, if you are not the one whose lifestyle is being attacked, then you have to figure out how to be the person who's better at listening because you have less to lose. And we expect that out of people who are creating policies that are really anti-sustainability, anti-women, anti-queer community, anti-lots of things. So if we're expecting them to do that, then we need to do that on the sustainability side too. And that's a hard truth to grapple with some days. But it's an important one. You know, be the change and all that. So yeah, okay, so we're gonna go. We got 6 minutes left, which is perfect timing. So back to our feelings chart. How y'all feeling now? Adventurous, that's such a good word. This is what I love about feelings charts. You come up with words you don't necessarily see. Yeah.
And as
Any
they,
questions?
as I
Here
add those
is-
tools, I was just going to add in one of our tools that we are doing, my partner and I, who are traveling together with my parents, have safe words that are keywords so that if there is a situation that arises, one of us can say those words to each other, and that is a immediate, hey, you need to either calm down, you need to back out of the conversation, you need to, you know, whatever that trigger word is for us. We've created that so that we can create that space for each other and be able to support each other when things get tense or we get angry or we feel these emotions that we feel. So that is something that my partner and I worked on for quite a while with both of our families, and that we will be implementing on our car ride. So I wanted to share that as well as another tool for your toolkit.
Yeah, creating safe boundaries is huge because you are not going to be capable of listening if you are feeling attacked and unsafe. That's true of everybody. You can't listen and feel unsafe at the same time. And it is unfair to ask people to listen and feel unsafe at the same time. So yeah, that's true. And then, so that is my contact information. And then also in this, some resources that I really like around this. This is our feelings list. Crucial Conversations is a really great book. They also have some courses and stuff, and that's really set up for how do you have these conversations in a work life, in a professional setting. Right. And so that is really focused on how do you create listening environments in a workplace. And then Nonviolent Communication is a book and a movement by Marshall Rosenberg that I love. And it is a lot around how do you talk about your feelings? How do you stay centered and present and able to listen in order to have communication that actually works? So these are some free, really good resources. They're all in the PowerPoint that Becky will email out. There you go. Any other questions, points, comments, concerns, things you want to talk about?
Yeah, so we have a few minutes. So if there's any questions, well, we have Jessi here.
Hey, Jessi, I read Crucial Conversations, and one of the things that I got out of it was oftentimes you may create a story before the conversation even starts, setting it up with your expectations for how it's going to go. And if you let go of those assumptions that you're making and let go of making up the other person's story, you can be a better listener.
Jen, do you want to pitch book club too?
Oh, sure.
While you're talking about books?
Yeah, when is it, this Sunday already? It's coming up pretty fast. We meet every 6 weeks to 8 weeks virtually like this, and as a group, we pick a book to read and talk about each session. It's basically sent out via the RISE newsletter each month. So if anybody wants to join, they can email me and
what
I
does
can
RISE
add
stand for, Jen?
Women in Renewable Industry and Sustainable Energy.
So yeah, if you are a woman who is interested in sustainability, you want to join a book club, Jen runs that. You can contact me or Jen, and I'll put you in contact with Jen. But yeah, we have a book club. It's fun. We read stuff about how to be a woman in a professional setting. We read fiction, we read kind of all kinds of stuff. We've got a pretty good running list of stuff. We've read lots of cool things. So yeah, so if you want to learn more, book club is a great resource for this exact topic.
Book clubs are amazing. Jamie, did you have a question?
Oh, I didn't have a question. I just had a thought I was going to share before we left, because I came from like a very conservative family, and I was like married to a very conservative person, and like, so I guess one thing I keep in mind is like, you know, it's like how people are like, oh, don't argue with people on the internet because you're not going to change your mind. So like whenever we're like in sustainability or anything like this, I always think like I had completely different viewpoints than I have now, just like a few years ago. And the way people approach me with information made a big difference. And so I always think about that, like when I'm like, this person is wrong. Like, I just know they're wrong. The thing I'm saying is like factually true and is the best choice or whatever. Like, I keep thinking about that. Like, people can change and can see a different viewpoint, but it takes time. Like, one conversation is not going to shift. It's going to take dozens for it to happen. So I guess that's like the thing I keep in mind most is what would make me, I'm very stubborn too, like want to hear this person out and be open to hearing what they're saying.
And change, something somebody said to me recently that I really like is that change happens in proximity, right? So it's hard for you. Like I am not, it's that same idea as compassion fatigue, right? You have to choose the things you care about. You have to choose the battles that you fight, right? And sometimes that means making hard choices. So I am actively not concerned about trash in the ocean, right? Like I have to decide. I live in Colorado. There is very little that I am personally going to be able to do to impact trash in the ocean. And I would deeply love it if sea turtles stopped eating plastic bags and dying, but it's just not a thing I can personally do anything about. And so I have to decide that I'm not going to get worked up about that. Right. And so because I'm not in proximity to places that will make differences there, but I'm also not in proximity to people who are like, I'm going to throw trash out anywhere and I don't care if it gets in the ocean. Right. So there's that proximity piece. So think about that too. And you get to decide, you know, where do you want to fight this battle? I also recommend not getting in fights with strangers on the internet. You're probably not going to change their mind. But 2 days in a car, Becky and her parents might learn something and learn to get along a little better and relate a little better. So they both might do a little bit of viewpoint perspective shifting.
And if not, there will be a murder mystery podcast in the waiting. So
see, there you go. Sometimes the choice really is we're all going to listen to this murder bomb.
We're all just going to listen to a podcast and be happy together in the car. So I will keep everybody posted on how that turns out. I know it is 1:31, so you have to run. Thank you for joining us. I do have one more question for you, Jessi, in relation to today's conversation. I think like looking into your crystal ball, what do you see and how this relates to the future and sustainability?
So I think that if we can learn how to listen in a better way, particularly in a lot of the class divides that we have around sustainability, because we have a lot of white college educated people making decisions at the policy level. And then you have a lot of blue collar people of color who are not necessarily college educated, kind of being impacted by those decisions. And so I think if you can cross the communication divide on that in the sustainability realm, it opens that door to being able to do it in so many other places. But I think it really does come back to you have to involve people in the conversation, and then you also have to be willing to throw money at it. It's going to take a lot of money, and that is just a thing that is true. But I think we are certainly getting better at listening in the longer term, and even out here where dying farm country, like we are building in Delta, Colorado, we are building an employee training program that emphasizes emotional intelligence in the workplace. And if Delta, Colorado can be building a thing on emotional intelligence in the workplace, I think we're way farther down the path to that than anybody thought. So I'm pretty jazzed about that.
I love it. I love it. There's always so much more happening that sometimes I think we realize that we are advanced, and to keep going. We with Women in Sustainability are about hope, and keeping that positive vision for a better future. And I think that that is a great way to remember that there is a lot of great advancements currently happening that we also need to talk about as well. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being here today and having this conversation and talking about the Lorax. And it's been amazing to bring it all together so that we can all hopefully take away a couple of tools and tips on how we can all become little bit better at our conversations. As a thank you from Women in Sustainability, we will be planting 3 trees in your name through One Tree Planted. So thank you from us. Thank you to everybody who joined us today. I will send out the recording as well as the resources and Jessi's information. Please get in contact with her. I will again say Jessi is a wealth of information when it comes to so many different topics. So highly recommend getting in touch. And thank you so much, Jessi, again for being here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Becky said, ask me if you've got questions.
Yep. Amazing. Well, thanks everybody. Go enjoy this beautiful day.